Hi everybody, I am Bryan Mullins the Fox. Now before I get to my official forecast and why it's most likely to happen this way, I must set the precedent and demonstrate the things that are in common with the roast game, the Great Satanic Panic of the 1980s, and Trump derangement syndrome. Firstly, Trump derangement syndrome came from and became a culture shock phenomenon itself, where anytime that anyone shows any support towards the 45th and 47th President of the United States of America is demoralized, deplatformed, culturally stigmatized, ostracized from their friends and families, and even pushed to suicide. All of this because he got elected for the first time in 2016 and again in 2024 as a Republican. And none of these people would have had the exact reaction had Donald Trump run as a Democrat at all and win. Secondly, the Great Satanic Panic of the 1980s and so on is based on culture shock itself because religious people alike deemed any bit of entertainment or person they can't understand and yet are offended by satanic, wherein when anytime that anyone shows any support and positive reception towards anything they deemed satanic is demoralized, ostracized from religious society altogether, from their friends and families, and even pushed to complete and utter social seclusion. And none of these people would have had that exact reaction had the Muppets and other Jim Henson content, much less entertainment that they otherwise deemed satanic, become religious propaganda that won't have any of them demoralized in the first place. And thirdly, the roast game and the respective era in which this past phenomenon took place is based on culture shock because the Jim Henson Company and Hallmark Entertainment bought off 45% of a then-to-be dying religious cable network, the parents that went on to kill a total of 104,632,147 children in both America and Canada combined from 1998 to 2016, while the 13,383 of the ones that were spared died up to the summer of 2017, felt demoralized and then began to demoralize their own children, in the same way those who were demoralized by Trump becoming president twice and by those who like entertainment like the Muppets and Pokemon despite claiming that they're satanic, and that those that consume such media are worshipping the fucking devil. Had the Odyssey channel been successful in the first place before November 16th, 1998, the Jim Henson Company and Hallmark Entertainment would have never had a reason to make that 45% acquisition, and hence, none of these parents would have ever had that exact reaction to that. Had the culture shock of 98 never happened the way it did at all, pretty much everyone would be excited for some non-religious content that kids love watching far more than a bunch of religious propaganda. Hell, why couldn't they just have VeggieTales on that network back then, in like 1999? That would have been fucking cool, but I digress. And had the relaunch of the network on April 4th, 1999, literally on Easter that year, were to have never needed to happen, had Odyssey Network been successful in the first place, the Easter roast game would have never happened at all in the first place. Both of these dinner traditions were abandoned the same way that having political discourse and norms and traditions in politics civilly went. And alternately, even those that call the Muppets satanic would have had no issue making that compromise at all. They would just change the channel to another religious network. Had this cable network been this successful at all, Crown Media would have never have folded it and made it the Hallmark Channel in 2001, and none of this Christmas shit would have been shoved down our throats day in and day out. The two things that these three phenomena have in common is demoralization and culture shock. Nothing more, nothing less. Now let's get into the most explicit detail as to what will actually cause two major and upcoming culture shocks in both 2025 and 2026, followed up by the third and last one in the process in 2027. Many people, not just nationwide, but also internationally, are demoralized by Trump every fucking day. They can't begin to grasp reality and what Trump actually does and says without deviating from it entirely. They hold on to false narratives and attack Trump at any given opportunity, even when it's retarded and wrong. and even the things they do have on him are exploited for psychopathic and political gain. Christians and Christian families were demoralized by entertainment like the Muppets because they believe it's satanic in the 1980s, and that there's this huge cult of Satanists trying to lure in their own children and other people to join their cult. And last but not least, what poetically ironic thing they do next after the initial reactions they had to those three phenomena. Number one, for those with Trump derangement syndrome, they started consuming more and more and more of anti-Trump content, news, and even Trump bashing altogether, even when it all got out of style and became an unprofitable strategy for the media. There are still some who persist with this mental illness to this day who can't let go, possibly less than half the country. And this only helped Trump by giving him all the power in the world, making more and more people become conservative and even pro-MAGA. Number two, for the roast game and roast game era, families began buying a whole lot of Christmas-themed direct-to-video specials and the like. More family Christmas movies were being made to the point where it's shoved down our throats day in and day out, even when they're getting out of fashion, becoming more and more samey, cringe, and even forced people to stop watching them altogether. Despite the Hallmark Channel accruing an audience size of 70 million plus TV sets nationwide, this all had the exact opposite effect than what was expected. They started questioning their beliefs in Christmas and religion altogether, and more people grew up to then become atheists later on. Number three, for the Great Satanic Panic of the 1980s, it had the same goddamn effect. Made people watch more and more of the content that extremist Christian families and people deemed satanic, and more people want entertaining shows and movies that aren't tainted with religious propaganda, having yet again the exact opposite effect than what was intended by these religious and extremist Christian parents and families back in the day, which then logically ended up having the second entry having happened at all. And the two events that in the long run stem from the roast game having happened at all will happen in this particular order. Brace yourselves. Number one, on Christmas Day 2025, Trump will issue what will become a more than typical Christmas Day message and make comments about making Christmas Day and Christmas dinner great again by even going as far to say something as bizarre about cannibalism. Number two, the aftermath of said potential comments about cannibalism and even dog eating for Easter will send shockwaves across the bow into the first of two upcoming culture shocks. Some will say something along the lines of, "I can't believe that the guy who was the cameo of Home Alone 2 Lost in New York said this about Christmas dinner, and I can't believe that he's our president." No wonder why Macaulay Culkin went on a downward spiral. And you know what? I can even cast a bit of foreshadowing that at worst, it could cause Macaulay Culkin's potential suicide, if any other unfortunate event will. In the business, we call this foreshadowing. And finally, number three, by the Christmas of 2026, 1 year after the day the first of two culture shocks potentially takes place, they'll starve themselves for the entirety of Christmas Day just to spite Trump, his supporters, and allies, and even to spite the Hallmark Channel and the culture surrounding Trump. And all of this, of course, would be a day after gorging themselves on Christmas Eve of that year, ending traditional Christmas dinner and the post-roast game era as we know it in the process, at the same time, causing yet another culture shock 1 year later after that by 2027, beginning the post-traditional Christmas dinner era in the process. And at this point, it's a fucking poetic 3-4-3 set of events to come. 3 things that have 2 things in common, and 3 culture shocks that have 1 thing in common: demoralization. They believe that they are being demoralized while demoralizing others themselves in the process. They do this for the sake of persecuting those they deemed enemies, or whatever they label them, demoralizing the other side of the fucking schism for the sake of deeming themselves persecuted for their own victim narrative. Demoralization is the end goal. Culture shock is the end result. So much so, they'll go out of their way to abandon any tradition they can entirely in the process, and that's happened multiple times before in history. And you know what? Since I came up with it now, I am also officially predicting that Hallmark Channel will be the biggest target of this Christmas's upcoming culture shock, just like its predecessor was back in 1998 and 1999. What if Macaulay Culkin commits suicide and Hallmark Channel pulls all Home Alone movies off the air and it sends shockwaves across the bow? Their stock and audience size will fucking tank. They'll lose a huge portion of their base and others will just change the channel anyway. I wonder what will replace the Hallmark Channel just like it replaced Odyssey Network in 2001. Only one can predict all this, and that would be me. And that's about it for now, and most likely for the future as well. What I should say to finish us off for this video is that the future of traditional Christmas dinner and culture is down the hall and to the left. I'm Bryan Mullins, the Fox, signing out. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.